Hey guys, welcome back to another Tech Show video. Today we're going to be taking a look at a device that you've probably never heard of, and there's a good reason for that. This is the Servo R26, a cheap AliExpress phone with some unique features that you might not expect, including built-in wireless earbuds. So let's go ahead, open the box, and see what's inside. On top we've got the phone itself, which here is the black color, but this phone is also available in gold and gray. Underneath the phone, we have a 3000 mAh battery, a power adapter I can't use, a micro USB cable I don't need, and a user manual full of helpful advice. But now let's take a look at the device itself, which is actually a bit bigger than I expected. But what actually surprised me even more is just how lightweight this thing is. Without the battery, it's one of the lightest devices I've ever held, and still with the battery, this thing just feels like a toy. Just take a look at these designs, like who even thought about putting these stars and fake screws? It literally looks like a cheap toy that would cost you a couple of dollars. But I've got to give them props for this design because I'm pretty sure they weren't copying anyone here. I've definitely never seen anything like it, but if you have and you think they were copying a real phone, please let me know because I'd really like to see that. Anyway, let's power it on and take a look at the software side of things. After an obnoxiously loud startup sound, we've got an equally obnoxious but maybe just more weird wallpaper. Why Lamborghini? What does that even have to do with this device? And yes, this is the only wallpaper on here, so I'm stuck with it for now. But anyway, let's talk about what this phone can do because it has some unique features. Starting with the least unique features, just for the sake of a thorough review, let's take a look at this operating system, which is unfortunately just more or less that proprietary OS that all of these cheap phones have. I mean, of course that's what I expected, but how cool would it be if you were to get one of these phones and it was running some really cool unique software? But nope, not here. It's got all the typical boring tools that you would expect to see, but it's not even as interesting as some of those phones out there because it only comes with one game, which is unsurprisingly a cheap version of Sokoban. You know, the game where you try to push all the crates around and not get them stuck. But that's really boring, no one wants to see that, so let's get into the fun stuff, starting with the camera. And the reason I'm saying fun while talking about this camera is because this camera is so bad, you just have to see it to believe it. Like seriously, look at these photos. To be fair though, they didn't even try to hype up this camera, they just barely even mentioned it's there, so I guess I can't say they lied about it, like so many of these companies do. But what they did hype up are the built-in wireless earbuds, which at first seems like a pretty cool feature. And I guess it kinda is, but there are definitely some pretty big issues with these. First issue would just be that these are those cheap generic AirPods clones, like those i7TWS things that started popping up everywhere a few years ago. If you're familiar with those, you'll know that they aren't the highest quality, and I'm not even picky about headphones. The only earbuds I use are these cheap JBL Vibes, and the sound quality is awesome to me. But these things are bad quality in a different way. Like I said, I'm not picky about audio quality, so the bass and treble and stuff like that here, it's acceptable. What's not acceptable is the characteristic hissing, popping, and crackling sounds even at normal volumes. But of course, that is exactly what I expected. What I did not expect is the fact that you can't listen to music through these headphones from the R26 itself. The phone does have an MP3 music player and an FM radio, which I'll talk about later, but you can't actually listen to either of those through these headphones. The only way to listen to music is to pair these to your smartphone, which is easy to do since they're just normal Bluetooth earbuds. If you pair them to the R26, it only gives you the ability to use them for calls, and that's it. If you want to listen to music on the R26, you'll be forced to use its strange built-in speakers. I say strange because the speakers are inside of the phone with no way for sound to escape, except through the top. So to hear music clearly, you have to open the earbuds door, and even then it's not great quality. For some reason, there are what appear to be fake speaker grills on the back of the device on either side of the camera, but they don't actually let any sound out. I thought at first they were real grills that were just unused, but I poked at it with a knife and it looks to simply be textured rubber or plastic. But getting back to the actual speaker quality, it's kind of weird. Like I mentioned, it sounds a little bit muffled, but that's not really an issue with the speaker itself. It seems to have a slight issue with volume where it starts clipping at a certain level, especially if you try to push any bass through it. And when there is bass, the whole thing vibrates like there's a good sized speaker in there. It's really weird when you hold it and feel the bass thumping through the phone, but your ears are hearing really bad audio. It just doesn't feel right. But apparently they were pretty confident that you'd want to listen to music through the speaker because the phone itself works as a Bluetooth speaker. Simply pair your smartphone or laptop via Bluetooth and you've got yourself a crappy Bluetooth speaker. To be fair, it's a little better than some laptops, but you're definitely not doing yourself any favors by using this as a Bluetooth speaker with any modern smartphone. And since this is technically two Bluetooth devices in one, it gets a little confusing as to whether you're connected to the earbuds or the phone's Bluetooth audio. The phone is called R26, seems simple enough, but the earbuds are simply called Servo, which I found a little confusing how generic that is, and besides, Servo didn't even make these earbuds. But anyway, audio quality and general weirdness aside, being able to use this thing as a Bluetooth speaker or just flipping the top open and getting earbuds out of the phone is just really unique, regardless of how well it was executed. If nothing else, it's a pretty cool party trick. But we've got a couple more kind of interesting features here that I have to mention. First one being the FM radio. It's not anything super remarkable, but it's worth noting that the FM radio is built into the phone, so there's no need to plug in headphones or anything, and it actually seems to get pretty strong radio signals for a built-in antenna anyway. One thing to note though is that if the Bluetooth earbuds decide to turn on by themselves, which happens sometimes, they will cause interference to the radio, making quite a bit of static noise. When it happened to me, I just thought it was funny, but for someone who was actually trying to listen to radio, this would probably be extremely annoying. But moving along to another unique feature, down here at the bottom of the phone next to the micro USB port for charging the phone, we've got a USB Type A port. That's right, this phone can also function as a power bank, in the case your friend's phone, or your real phone, runs out of juice. Unfortunately though, the power flow is pretty low, which makes charging kinda slow, and that's enough rhyming. But anyway, I didn't test exactly how long it took to charge my phone, but it's certainly not fast charging. And you can easily drain your battery faster than it charges if you use your phone while it is charging, which is not advised anyway, so maybe that's for the better. There are other annoying problems with this though. First off, the battery life indicator is not accurate. It almost always seems to show the battery is full. I found this out the hard way when I was trying to use it as a battery bank, and it just kept turning off. At first I thought there was an issue with the phone, but it turns out the battery was just too low. But it was showing full, which brings us to our second battery issue. Okay, before we get to the second issue, I want to mention that after writing this part, I noticed the battery only showed 1 bar. I've only ever seen it at full, 1 bar, and one time it was even empty, and then it randomly filled up, so there's definitely an issue here with reading battery life. Anyway, let's get back to the main topic. Another issue with this phone is that it itself charges very slowly. So slowly in fact that I don't think I've ever actually charged it all the way up. It can sit on the charger for hours but never seems to fill up and just shows this generic battery charging animation that in no way indicates how much battery juice is left. And before someone asks the most obvious question of how long the battery lasts, I don't know. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't remember ever filling it all the way up, but I do know that I've plugged it in for multiple hours and then it only gives my phone 10 or 15% before it dies, so I feel like battery life is slightly questionable, and of course there's also just battery quality and safety questions in general, so who knows what kind of battery bank this phone would really make. But anyway, let's talk about the last and I'd say not least feature on the R26, the flashlight. On the right side of the phone there's this pretty self-explanatory red switch with a little logo that looks something like a flashlight. Switch it on and sure enough we've got a flashlight. It's actually pretty bright for just a phone flashlight, and unlike most normal phones, this flashlight lens is focused into a small disc shape rather than your standard ambient soft light. This gives it the illusion that it is brighter than a normal phone flashlight, and indeed it does appear to have a farther range, much like a traditional flashlight. As you can see, it is much more useful, although not as pleasant as the light from an average smartphone. And one more cool thing about this flashlight, the phone doesn't actually need to be turned on to use it. In fact, even when the battery is too low for the phone to power on, the flashlight will often still function. Pretty cool. What's not so cool though is the overall cheap design of this phone. Yes, we're talking about the design again because while I was using this phone one day, something randomly fell out of it, and the top cover stopped closing properly. I was immediately able to tell that the object that had fallen out of it was the small magnet that holds the earbuds door closed. Instead of encasing it in plastic, putting tape over it, or even gluing it in, they simply used a very small, slightly sticky strip reminiscent of a thermal pad. I was easily able to put it back, but who knows when it'll fall out again. I'm not really surprised this thing is already falling apart. It's just something that you might want to note, if for some reason you buy this phone. But do I recommend buying this phone? I feel like this video speaks for itself. I really have no use for it except showing off its weird quirks. Also worth noting is this phone is compatible with 3G networks only. So, particularly if you're in the States, good luck getting any carrier to actually work here. So is it worth the $40 you'll have to spend in order to get one of these? Well, at this point it doesn't really matter since it's out of stock pretty much everywhere, but if they ever come back in stock and you really want some cheap earbuds with an equally cheap phone, go for it. Just be aware of the drawbacks I've mentioned here, and if you do pick one of these up, let me know what you think of it in the comments below. And hey, if you've made it this far, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate the support. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any further content, and I'll see you in the next video.